Welcome back to Colony, the official podcast. I'm your host, Tara Bennett, a senior producer for SYFY WIRE. And this week, we are talking episode 3.8, Lazarus, with two people who continually rise to the occasion. Oh, see what I did there? Oh, no. Co-creator, executive producer, Ryan Condal.
Hi, Tara.
Hi, Ryan. And executive producer, Wes Tooke. Hello, sir.
I usually get a much more enthusiastic reception.
I'm trying to change
Tara's
it up
taking
a
over
little bit.
as the writer now.
Yeah,
she's writing
I'm
the
doing
puns.
shtick. All right, so all right, I guess I didn't get hired based on that opening. So no Tara in the writer's room. But no, thank you guys so much for being here. And we've also got a brand new guest to the podcast, a familiar face this season, the woman formerly known as Dispatch around here, Amy, actress Peyton List. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Yay, Peyton.
Yay, Peyton. She has been such a wonderful addition to this season, and we've been getting to really get to know you just as Broussard is, as they've had their journey north. But before we get into the deep part of your arc this season, let's talk about the cold open. It's a return to the pods. We have not seen them for a little while. We see that poor guy opening up and having like what we think is the worst morning ever, but then he starts wiping out people left and right. It's such a great mini action movie to start this episode. Tell me about what the thought was, why it's important for us to see these again.
Well, I had been angling for a long time for a cameo on the show, so it just felt like, when we cracked that teaser, it was really the right time.
Yeah, I mean, the stunt body obviously is so imposing. We knew that it had to be Condal.
That's right. I mean, I worked out for as much as 2 weeks leading up to that. So
that good. Wow. That's amazing.
That stunt guy, by the way, is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean,
him running around was just amazing watching what he was doing.
We shot that in a day and a half, so all those stunts are practical. I mean, he was jumping up. It was insane. The stuff he was doing was truly insane.
Yeah, he's a gymnast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. I think the best stunt sequence in the show to date.
Yeah,
really,
I would say that too.
Just pure stunts. But yeah,
it says a lot in just what he can do. He's barfing up the green, and then you're thinking, oh no, like everyone else we've seen, and then he like super soldiers it through this opening. So that says a lot about what those pod people are going to be doing.
The fun with these teasers is they can live outside of the world a little bit. And obviously, we tell it outside of the POV of the main show and introduce characters that you would not otherwise meet. And we had fun with that one. It just felt like the show has gotten distinctly more science fiction-y this season, and this teaser particularly felt like a really cool way to open up the world of the show and start pulling back the curtain and seeing what's happening elsewhere. So that's this mysterious island facility that we've maybe seen in the background or hinted at in the show, and now we're seeing actually what's going on out there.
Yeah.
We wanted to also be able to parallel in the body of the episodes. When you look out there through Broussard's eyes, you suddenly know what you're looking at.
Absolutely. And speaking of that ties into that first scene where we have Will and Broussard talking about the IGA docs that Puzzleman had been putting together and seeing that there was something about a bioweapon. And so that's the first time we really have this conversation about, did anything come out of what Broussard spent all of that time doing in the early part of the season?
The best road show ever with Broussard and Amy and their journey north, driven by some torn up pieces of paper from a totalitarian government. You never know what'll bring people together, really.
You never know. So that's a perfect segue back to you, Peyton. And let's talk about when you first came into the show, what intrigued you about her and what felt interesting in terms of being able to bring her to life?
For most roles, you have very little information to go off of. And I think going into this, you guys sent me like the first 3 or 4 scripts at once. So I had a much bigger idea as to where they wanted, not where they wanted to go, but who she was to begin with. I think that was such a luxury to have when you are looking at going to do a job, because I didn't know where she was going to go or like the full extent of it, but I really liked her and I'd never played something like that. And I really liked the show. And it was the perfect sort of storm.
It was a really challenging piece of casting because we knew that we were going to put someone on an island with Tori. And Tori is a wonderful actor, but he also has a huge presence, so you need someone who can stand up to that. We also knew that this role was going to have some tropey aspects to it for reasons that eventually would become clear. She's a neuroscientist, and the kind of background of the role, it could have felt very genre. So we needed someone who was going to be able to bring humanity to it and handle being across from Tori. They were not going to have other supporting actors around them. They're going to be going on this journey. So it was a huge responsibility.
Well, they do, but they all die.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. They don't last long. Anytime you guys make a little stop along the way,
bad things happen.
And beyond that, there was also the issue of Tori had done the mentor thing before.
Right.
So we needed to find a new angle into who he was going to work with. And it felt like it was time for him to finally have a partnership and someone who was going to be able to have their own life and their own opinions on things. And that would be able to drive a lot of drama around Tori because we wanted to expand his role this season also. So to embarrass Peyton in front of her, it was a very challenging role. And as soon as we found out that she was potentially interested, we were delighted.
And it's wonderful because that dynamic is very different. Katie was in a position where she was learning a lot from him, but your character has been so fascinating because you keep pushing him. Why are you doing what you're doing? And what is this isolationism getting you? And that's really fascinating. Was there any scene in those first episodes that you particularly remember that you enjoyed, just the back and forth between you and Tori and your characters?
I don't know if there was like one in particular. I felt like each sort of real long conversation that they actually have, you learn so much about what the relationship is and who she is and how she will have a meeting of the minds with him, even if they're just fundamentally different people. I think she didn't always seem like, in the beginning at least, like she was somebody that would ever be easily led. However, she recognizes that in Broussard, there is a lot of value in that he's survived and that he's military and he has a lot to offer. So it's a likely partnership, but it's also a difficult one at times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really sweet and illuminating when they do sort of come together. And yeah, I think it makes them an interesting partnership.
Yeah.
And that's another big challenge with this role, is that we're time jumping a bunch. So you were getting little snippets of their relationship. For example, after episode 6, it's 6 months between the time you see them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're asking the actors to do a lot of that off-screen work for you. So you're dropping directly into this relationship, and you have to catch up really quickly as an audience member on how the relationship has evolved.
Absolutely. I particularly remember the Raft sequence where you had to... That looked cold even from home. Tell me a little bit about that sequence and what they made you go through for it. It seemed like hazing, guys. Honestly, it looked like a little bit of hazing to the poor new girl on the show.
Tori insisted on it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that day as being a really intense shooting day, but a really great day. And I didn't know how they were going to do the water. It's one thing reading it on the page, and then another thing when everybody comes together to execute it. And it wasn't tropical. It was not a sandy beach.
Oh, is it that like gloopy, like
It
foot
was,
goes in?
it was rock. It was just rocks, but it was stunning. And also what you obviously don't see on camera is that what we're looking at is 2 separate camera crews in, what do you call those
Waders.
things? Waders.
Yeah.
Up to their waist in freezing Pacific water.
Yeah.
And you're going, well, I can't really complain about anything because they're actually up to their waist in this water shooting
man.
back towards us. That was really quite something to see.
Remember, Vancouver is the paradise of Canada. It's
is.
the place
It
where
truly
everybody,
is.
when they've had enough of the cold in Toronto, they all buy houses in Vancouver, which is
It's
why
true.
you can't afford anything in Vancouver right now, because that's basically the Los Angeles of Canada. So
That sequence was originally written as a canoe paddling out in the water,
Yeah.
flipping over, them hiding beneath it, peering out, seeing a drone.
wow.
So,
I was kind of hoping we were going to do that until I realized it was, what, October?
yeah, you
Yeah.
ever want to watch a line producer laugh at you? You hand them a script like that. You just,
well, only after he was done weeping.
yeah.
Right.
That's the Colony process right
Yeah.
there.
Do you want Peyton to be on the show anymore after this?
Tears and
Hypothermia is not
sarcastic
good.
laughter, a Colony story.
We'll move it forward into the Seattle arc. You've got a lovely home because of your skills.
I have a lovely home.
It's
really beautiful.
Very nice. Aside from the decor, we really get to kind of see where you and Broussard are. All of that time on the road has created this ease between the two of you now. And tell me a little bit about either the notes that they gave you in the script to really kind of, again, show all of that time on the road has established a different level of trust.
Well, no, it's exactly what you said. Because the show does these like time jumps, you also want to respect what would have happened off camera. And I think during the time where Amy and Broussard are on the road, you sort of see them fall into a sync or fall into an understanding where they don't necessarily need to explain themselves all the time. And I think when you see them in Seattle, they've fallen even more in sync, where they just have these cues and signals. And you just see it in the writing. And then also, like, Tori was already doing it. So I just kind of followed his lead and sort of, it's in a look. It's not in a, let me over-explain this. So
Right.
you just sort of have your own body language with people that you go through a lot with. And I think you sort of see that with Broussard and Amy. They just are kind of in step with one another now.
And Amy's had a huge impact on Broussard. I think, unfortunately, it did not make the final cut. But the first time that Will visits the house, Broussard does make him wipe his feet before he comes inside.
No,
So
does he make it?
It's just
Oh.
this, and it's this beautiful little moment where he just gives him the Broussard stare and then just points down at the mat. There's nothing is exchanged, and then Will just sort of dejectedly wipes his feet. It's such a great,
I love that.
just again, tonally not. It was an awesome moment of actor improvisation that shows the domestication of Broussard, which is something that we all wondered whether that could ever
Could
happen.
it ever happen?
But
Absolutely.
that's-
Yes.
That's part of
it
the magic
can.
that Amy brought to his life.
Floor respect is important to Broussard. Now we know.
The Netflix version of the show includes an extended sequence of feet wiping.
There's just a whole episode about it.
Yeah.
One of the things I love is the world-class stink eye that you happen to give Will when he comes into the house. And it was great because it actually made me think of the stink eye that Broussard gave Will back in the day when it was Broussard not really quite knowing where he wants to be. So it's a great moment in terms of full circleness, but also it really lets us know that Amy has super concerns about Will coming into this duo of trust that's been built.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, we don't really know Amy so much from before, but she's behaving almost like Broussard would normally behave, which is, we need to fully vet this guy. I mean, I know you have, but I haven't, and I don't want to put my life in this guy's hands if I don't think he's on the same level that we are in terms of caution. And they're very close to death often, so I don't think
she's unwise in asking for that.
Yeah.
The other part of the episode, we really have Katie coming back into the exploratory mode that we've known her to have, which is status quo is not cool. If something starts to feel weird, let's start peeling back on the layers of the proverbial onion. And she's doing that in the work situation. So tell me about how you wanted to take the woman who has really embraced this potential new life in Seattle and start to bring back the woman that inherently go with her instincts when something seems wrong.
Upon the Bowman's arrival in Seattle, we were really interested in building out a story in season 3 that led us to a point where we could actually inverse their roles from season 1. And now, very subtly, you realize that Will and Katie, through the course of these 2 initial episodes in Seattle, have flipped where they were when we met them back at the beginning of the show. Will is kind of working on the sly in the gray area of the law and freelancing for himself and trying to hunt down these answers. And we find Katie as a version of a collaborator, working for the government, working for the man in a way. I mean, in her own way. It's not a direct inverse, but it does show how far the characters have come and how they've evolved and how now they are dealing with the trauma that they've both suffered with the loss of Charlie and just having lived in the wilderness and being hunted for so long. This is where they've sought solace. I mean, Will obviously has a lot of unsolved things that he hasn't talked about. Katie doesn't have a partner to talk to anymore because Will is so detached and out there. So she's trying to salve her wounds by helping other people that have gone through the same traumatic experiences that she has and her family has. So she's doing it that way, trying to convince herself that if I can't help my own family, if I can't be there for them, if I couldn't be there to protect my son, I'm going to try to do it this way for other families, which is a very idealistic, romantic Katie thing to do. But there's also that element of her where she can't leave well enough alone. And when the question marks start scratching at her, she starts going down a road that doesn't necessarily lead to good places because as we know, wherever the Bowmans go, they just ruin the lives of everybody they encounter.
But it is also the next iteration of the character, though, in the sense that she is motivated largely by wondering whether this place is safe for her family.
Right.
And that is going to drive her in a way that it hasn't in the past. Her character now is accumulation of all the previous experiences, and the experiences and the cost that they've paid lead her to think about these things in a different way, with different text and subtext. So as soon as her flag goes up, before it might have been driven solely by curiosity or resistance or idealism, and now there's also pragmatism there, which is, I've walked my family in here. Is it safe? Is this a place we can live?
Will and Broussard are certainly having their missions together. Amy is kind of, whether or not they want him to be part of that. But then the rest of the Bowmans, another really interesting part of the story is that Bram has really taken to heart what Katie asked of him before they really walked into Seattle, which was, whatever happens, you got to take care of your sister. And that is really played out in this episode where we see him even at the point of thinking, if I get a better job and I take her to a better school, I'm going to take her there. I'm not really worrying about what mom and dad have to say. And that's a real separation in the family that isn't present to the parents, but it's a real mindset for Bram.
Yeah, I mean, the family finds themselves incredibly fractured, and we liked this idea that the dramatic irony of what would be typical in a situation like this, where the sullen teenager doesn't talk to anybody about what's going on in his head, and instead you have the adults are not speaking to each other or really to the children, and the only people that are being honest with each other are the 2 kids who have been forced to mature well beyond their years as a result of all the things that they've suffered through. And the only honest Bowman family conversation is going on in those moments between Bram and Gracie, which is interesting, but also heartbreaking at the same time. And Bram has really stepped up and matured. And we always saw him as very much his mother's son. So in his own way, in season 2, is going through a lot of the same beats that Katie went through in season 1, as the romanticism of the idea of resistance kind of died in front of him. And he realized how bad the occupation was and how awful the people involved with it are and how the depths of the depravity that people are capable of. But then he actually acts on his resistance leanings and kills somebody and then realizes how much that stains his soul school and has to live with that. So now he's come out the other side of this with like, I'm not an idealist anymore. I'm just worried about, I lost my brother. I don't believe in my parents as parents or as role models anymore at all. So I have to be the one. I have to now take on this role as an adult and take care of my sister. It just seemed like the appropriate evolution for Bram, and also a thing that you don't see this kind of character, which is, as are a lot of things in the show, is a potential trope within a genre science fiction world. So we want to try to figure out something new to do with it. And Alex is such a terrific actor that he really leaned into it. And you believe it. I mean, you really... The kids, Alex and Isabella, how much they've grown up since we met them 4 years ago on the pilot. The story needs to grow up and mature with them, which is why a couple of these time jumps help. We've really spent a lot of time with them, both as writers and as audience members, and we want to see where the next place that relationship is going to go, where they're not just set decoration, we're not just the kids in the family, they're actually living, breathing individuals that do and can change the course of the story in their own right.
Behind the scenes, this is also a little bit of a happy accident in this episode in that we had a short cut. And we never have done this, but we went back and shot an additional scene.
Really?
And we got the opportunity to look and say, what do we feel like we're missing? And it's exactly what Ryan is putting his finger on, that you're sensing that there's something going on in the kids in this family and it's not really explored. So we wrote that walk and talk in the park. And first of all, a tip of a hat to two young actors. It was just pouring rain. It was a miserable day. It's hard to hit all those marks, and they nailed it every time. And it feels very human and very real and very grounded. And we didn't have a lot of time to shoot it. And I think it adds a lot of context to that relationship. So sometimes in production, there are things that happen that make it harder and more challenging to tell the story, but this was kind of a happy accident that I think has opened up all the scenes moving forward. You'll understand that there's an additional layer of subtext, hopefully, that came out of that 2 minutes.
That was Wes's idea, and scene that he wrote, I had pitched leaving Broussard and Amy in the water for a little bit longer. Just really drawing that. I really wanted to feel what they're feeling.
And the feet wiping. You were really into feet wiping.
From the warmth of my space-heated executive producer tent where no one is allowed to look me in the eye, of
course. The robe
course.
is on you, and you've got a warm snifter of brandy next to you.
Yes.
You were...
Red M&Ms only.
Yes, always. The
Bart
writer said.
was making s'mores for me on the coal-fired grill next to me. But
let's talk about one of the scenes that actually is a culmination. So also in this episode, Snyder's been really digging into Kynes' group. We get the plan with Broussard and Amy and Will, and it's this big moment where Will basically sees Snyder and changes everything about what the plan is going to be, basically doing what Amy was worried about from the very beginning, which
I don't think I actually get out, I told you so.
Your face
But
does.
my face says it.
that was the alternate title for the episode. My face says, I told you so.
I'm very familiar with that face.
We've seen that a lot in our lives and in the world of Colony.
Broussard and Amy just have to figure it out. And it's a great beat where in that alleyway, you block in the SUV and it's pretty extreme. And it also, again, shows the trust in play with the two of them going, all right, let's just see what plan B is and we'll do it. And they execute well.
Yeah, I mean, I think in that sequence is when you see when everything goes wrong, what do they fall into? And it's just fall in step and it's just total trust until you get out of the danger and then sort of reassess. But you see that in that split second when Will just diverts from the plan and all of a sudden, different story.
It's a little crazy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the tech, because when they do open that case, it's obviously something that's being super protected. Tell me about what you guys wanted to reveal.
I'd been demanding all season that I get to build some alien chainmail, so Wes finally let me have my way.
You have to give him something nice every now and
I
then.
know, honestly. You let him nerd out.
Yeah.
It's very cool in terms of what we're allowed to get a glimpse at. Did you have a specific idea, or was this a conversation with props about what would end up being the thing that would be portrayed in the show? Or
it started from just a storytelling standpoint. We wanted to show Kynes is the most knowledgeable, powerful person that we've ever met in the show to date. I mean, more than Helena and certainly more than Snyder. He does have an inside line with something above the occupation. We don't know exactly what that is because we haven't seen anything to date yet. But he's not a liar or a self-aggrandizer. Kind of everything that he has said and claimed has thus far been proven true. So we wanted to show just how far that relationship went. And we've never seen humans wielding any kind of alien technology before, but it's obvious from what happens here that he has some access to something. And whether that's legitimate access, whether he's been allowed to do this, or whether he's doing this behind the scenes and off the books, it remains to be seen. seen. But we wanted to demonstrate something that reminds everybody this is a show about an alien occupation, and there's certain technology that's involved with that, and that Kynes is working on something. We see the magic lettuce that Snyder refers to, and then we see this thing, which we understand that's obviously incredibly powerful. It stops a bullet, and it seems weightless and formless. Very interesting, but we don't ultimately know what it is or where it came from, and that's part of the fun of creating a science fiction mystery.
We wanted a velociraptor. We got talked into magic lettuce and special saran wrap.
We did ask for velociraptors. Season 4?
Season 4.
I like that. That's good. So we end on a very ominous note with this episode. Will saying, I'm going to kill him in reference to Snyder. And that's a damn fine cliffhanger. But it's also knowledge about why he pulled what he did. And it wasn't so much from Amy's estimation that he's not being loyal, that he has an agenda when he saw Snyder. Was it always a moment that you were kind of leading towards because this is the man that lived with him and then left him to die, technically?
Well, this is the journey of this guy, right? He starts as the square-jawed Josh Holloway-esque hero, and we're 3 seasons into that, and this family's been through a lot. And obviously, he's decided to fixate all of his anger and rage about what has happened and personify it in Snyder. And that is obviously an incredibly emotionally unhealthy way of going about living your life, and it's going to have consequences that are going to ripple not beyond just what he does to Snyder, but into his own family. And that's what the show is trying to talk about a little bit this year, which is the processes that go on when you're dealing with grief, with dislocation, with all these things that are happening sometimes in the world around us also, that, unintended consequences that occur anytime there's dislocation or trauma.
One of the great tricks, I think, with writing serialized television is finding organic ways to put your best actors, your core cast, back into dramatic situations together. And the trick with this show, we've changed environments so many times, areas, locations, things like that, where trying to put Will and Snyder, who have this great dynamic that we all watch, trying to find situations that feel plausible to put them back in the same space together. And this was something that we had designed out, when we broke the major architecture of the season, we knew that we were going to go through these beats of the Bowmans living and adventuring with Snyder, Snyder either selling them out or trying to save them, depending on whose point of view you're looking through, Will blaming that on Snyder, and then the world's coming back together again, and Will focusing his rage on Snyder, and then that coming to a head and what that would look like when that eventually happens. So this is all the track being laid for that in a way that hopefully feels organic and doesn't feel like we're the sort of writer term that people use is tiny town, and you don't want your show to feel like tiny town where no matter where you go in the world, you keep running into the actors who are contracted to your show for 13 of 13 episodes. But yes, so hats off to Josh for portraying this incredibly dark turn that his character is taking, but doing it in a way that doesn't feel like a genre show. It feels like a dramatic show. In a less, I think, subtle, nuanced version of the show, this feels kind of like a Clint Eastwood moment. You can imagine the surging score and, I'm going to have my vengeance in this life or the next. Whereas this feels, to me, the first time I saw it, it felt like a tragic sort of, you feel bad for the guy and you feel like he is very angry and hasn't been able to focus that on anything constructive or healthy. And his kids have kind of gone wayward, and what is he doing and risking his life? And I'm very curious what the audience makes of the encounter to come.
You guys have approached mourning in this arc and how it unfolds. Some shows would do a great big moment, everybody cries it out and then moves on, and you don't really see people thinking about Charlie anymore. Instead, it's kind of changed everybody in their DNA and how Bram reacts and how Katie's doing to, save other people, and then what it's done to Will. And that's really wonderful because it feels like how people would really deal with it, which isn't set in stone and isn't always dramatic per se. It culminates.
Which brings us back to Peyton. Her character is the outside observer.
Yes.
Right? And she hasn't gone through some of these traumas and does not have the history with this family. So is able to be kind of the voice of reason in a lot of these situations and stare at it and say something here is wrong, something is not healthy, there's something wrong with that guy. In a way that Broussard, who just has been around the Bowmans and understands their trauma and has maybe internalized what happened to Charlie, doesn't process. And that is an incredibly helpful voice to have dramatically.
That's a great point, because Peyton and her character Amy have walked into the situation where it very much mirrors the situation that Peyton as an actor walked into on the show, which is this incredibly dysfunctional family. She's coming in from the outside and like, these people are really kind of fucked up. Like, what is wrong with all of you? And trying to find her way, through it. And I have to say, hats off, did a remarkable job finding her way in. And most of the guest characters that come into the world of Colony are kind of on a set timeline. Like I've always said, not a long life expectancy as a guest star on the show, but but Peyton has a much longer arc with our core cast and our main characters and really fit in incredibly well. And it felt so organic the way it all played out. But if you watch the show through her point of view, through Amy's point of view, you see her looking into this world where, like, these are deeply damaged people. Everybody.
Totally.
Snyder, Broussard, the Bowman.
She is not wrong in questioning them.
What the hell did I get myself into? Maybe I should have just stayed in the San Fernando block with my purple headscarf in a theocratic hospital pulling splinters and rocks out of children's fingers.
Yep.
But she made her decision, and now,
Now she's stuck with these people.
Now she has her sweet house on the Seattle shoreline.
Yeah.
As part of the family, Peyton and I figured out that her sister went to high school at my high school.
Yeah. Oh, really?
We actually both
Backstory.
did some modeling junior year. Mm-hmm. Hers was in Paris. Mine was in my dorm room with a glue gun. But
amazing. Now it's in my head forever.
Wow. Wow.
So we do have some listener mail this week. Fan Carly Peck wants to know if each season, starting with someone making breakfast, has a hidden message.
No.
There you go, Carl. Answer. Quick and easy.
No, so this whole runner has become larger than life, and our joke was if there ever is a season 4, it actually will be a velociraptor, rising out of its egg, because
that's the new way for breakfast.
Ultimately, all roads lead to velociraptors in this show. If we had 8 seasons, what would the 8th season egg gag look like?
Yeah,
and you just have to keep topping yourself.
Up the game.
So where all this started was I've always loved the Billy Wilder film Stalag 17.
Yeah.
Starring William Holden. A very worthwhile film to go check out. And then, Billy Wilder's a little more known for his comedic fare, but it's a very Billy Wilder movie because it's a movie about a Nazi prison camp, but it has this kind of light charm to it. It's a prisoner of war camp in World War II, and William Holden's character is this kind of confidence man, and he's the guy that can get anything and source
whatever
anything.
you want. Yeah.
And there's this great sequence in the movie where he sources himself an egg, which in that time for breakfast, which is a great luxury, and he lovingly prepares it and cooks it, and you just see all these other soldiers who haven't had protein in months just watching him and hating him for it. And I was really taken with the idea of how a simple thing that we would all take for granted, this simple commodity in an egg, in an extreme situation becomes such a luxury and such a thing that we would never think twice about in our own world, and how that all changes based on the situation we find ourselves in. So I really like that imagery. I love Billy Wilder as a filmmaker. And when I was writing the pilot a million years ago, I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to pay a little homage to Billy Wilder. Now it's become a thing that we have to continually concept, to spend like a week talking about the egg sequence to open the next season.
We could just say that we don't like questions instead of going the whole Stalag 17 route.
That's true. No further questions.
No further questions. Carl was very astute. He saw your homage and he saw that there was something behind there. So thank you so much, Ryan, Wes, Peyton. Thank you so much for being here for this episode, and we'll see what happens next week.
Thank you.
As always, I want to thank my podcast team, producer Bartley Taylor, producer-editor Paul Terry, mixer and master extraordinaire Dave Draper, and Mike Casatini and the Network Studios for hosting us. And if you're enjoying the show, please give us a review and subscribe on iTunes. The better rankings we do on that service, it will help Colony's profile. And we want more of your questions for our listener mail segments. Leave them for me via the comment section at the bottom of every weekly podcast post on SYFY WIRE, or reach out to us on Twitter with questions via my handle, @TaraDBennett, or #ColonyPodcast. And thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We appreciate every single download, all the comments, and we hope you come back with us next week.